I ended up in a YouTube rabbit hole the other day. If you haven't seen, Randall Terry, a man who once led Operation Rescue in the US in the early 90s, has opened a new training facility in Memphis, Tennessee, and has begun again to bring groups of pro-lifers to barricade the doors of abortion houses. I was watching documentaries on them from the 1990s at midnight, as you do. The police brutality was shocking. Broken arms, induced miscarriages, and even some deaths. Yet one thing stood out. Like in the 90s, the group last week were arrested, but as they were being carried away by police, they weren't apologetic, they weren't distracted, and they weren't mouthing off about their First Amendment rights either. They were talking solely about the babies being slaughtered behind them in the abortuaries. I'm worried that the modern pro-life movement in the UK has lost that focus and integrity. I'm Ben Weller, and this is Viewpoint. I went through a massive libertarian phase. Most people in my age group who had had their late teenage years scuppered by coronavirus-era state heavy-handedness did. The Don't Tread on Me flag and a belief that we'd be better under effective anarchy. Rights this, liberties that, and free speech forever. I grew out of it, thank God. But I think the pro-life movement in the UK is still in the throes of it. Whether it's our actual priorities or just the optics, something has gone wrong. We're hung up on principles of free speech at the expense of our principles of life. Now be patient, you'll soon see where I'm going with this, I hope. But I've been reading The Everlasting Man by G.K. Chesterton recently. And in the first few chapters, he delves into the idea that man is different. Man is exceptional. When we start to view man as just another animal, we realise that he absolutely is not one. In the mid-1920s, when Chesterton was writing this stuff, the tide had already turned in literary and academic circles towards the modernist subjectivity that developed into the postmodern nihilism that has brought us to the current day. In his criticism of the folkloric concept of the caveman, he mentions that it was a creation by a society trying to excuse a very modern form of anarchy. It was out of these fresh ideologies, this modern anarchy and this belief that man at his core is animalistic, that the post-war rights framework developed. An international nouveau aristocracy of supposedly learned middle-class lawyers started telling us that we can follow our hearts to the full, seeing that they don't quash the minority expression of others. They codified legally protected self-worship and packaged it with the label rights and liberties. I think that for many people, especially in my generation, that worldview they built is evaporating. We've started to realise that life is not about me, and that some things are sacred enough that they're out of reach to even the most avid revolutionaries. Unaccountable international bodies protecting self-entitlement don't quite slide anymore, and the pro-life movement needs to change its language and tactics accordingly. I'm sure that the majority of viewers will agree with me that the reason abortion is wrong is that the shedding of innocent blood is always wrong. I mean, I'd go further and say it brings curses upon the nations. Yet, if you looked at today's pro-life marketing, you'd think that our main focus is free speech around abortion clinics, or coerced abortion, or the home abortion pill. And these are all worthy focuses, of course, but we need to drive the nail right through. Buffer zones shouldn't exist because we need to stop women from entering abortion houses to have their babies killed. Coerced abortion is bad because a baby dies. The home abortion pill is bad because the end result is a dead baby. Ben's trying to rip up the playbook. Yes, I am a little. Because where's the current one got us? We've lost every battle because we appeal to the powers that hate us by their rules. We squeeze our fights into their treaties and conventions when they were never written for us. We use the feminist language or the language of the international rights framework, yet every time we've appealed to it, we've lost. Let us just pray and they slap us with a buffer zone. We don't harass, we just offer help. They don't care. What about coercion? Pills by post is still here, but the UN Charter mentions the right to life. We've had 58 years of abortion. Maybe it's time to regroup and think about how we brand our fights. The American rescuers I mentioned earlier, who were carried away by police, who broke their arms and nunchucks and threatened to rape them, spoke of only one thing: the babies being slaughtered. And they created a national headline movement that shaped American political discourse for the early half of the 1990s. Here, we grovel, all apologetic that people feel uncomfortable outside of abortion facilities, promising that we hate harassment as much as the state. I mean, what? Maybe I want people to feel uncomfortable walking into an abortion clinic. Maybe I want them to turn around and go home. A postmodern rights framework arbitrated by postmodern judges won't help us, and using their language won't either. We need something more compelling, something that speaks to those untouchable truths about humanity I touched on earlier. Let's make our messaging about duty again. Duty to love our neighbour by protecting them from murder, duty to parent your children well, duty to steward your body and sex well. If we don't, we're simply capitulating to the spirit of the age. And if you watched my previous viewpoint on contraception, you know where that gets us. If we're too careful to speak in the language of the enemy, we start missing the point. Assisted suicide is bad because it is not safe, yes. But out of all the speeches in the House of Lords on the matter, the most compelling was from our former Prime Minister, Lady May. She said this.
And finally, my lords, this is not an assisted dying bill. It is an assisted suicide bill. As a society, we believe that suicide is wrong. The government has a national suicide prevention strategy. We bemoan the number of young people who are lured into committing suicide by social media and what they read on the internet. This week is World Suicide Awareness Week. Suicide is wrong, but this bill effectively says suicide is okay. What message does that give to our society? Suicide is not okay. Suicide is wrong. This bill is wrong. And in my opinion, it should not pass.
Assisted suicide is wrong because suicide is wrong. That's the message. We can skirt around the edge all we like. We're welcome to. But just like with abortion, we cannot forget the core principle. Abortion is wrong because babies die. Euthanasia is wrong because people die. Simple. And I mean, another anecdote is from the March for Life. I saw this woman with this t-shirt. The only good pro-lifer is a dead one. If somebody on our side of the aisle wore something similar, they'd have us bundled in a van, sentenced and sent to rot away in Wandsworth. We just shrug and say free speech. But what is free speech? It's historically been a means to an end, open discourse to allow one to arrive at the truth. Yet it seems we've started treating it like the goal. It's not the goal. The goal is a safe, family-oriented society, not an atmosphere where lies can thrive. Maybe we need to get on the right-wing cancel culture train. After all, are we free speech absolutists or life absolutists? I'd hope the latter. In the same way that our appeals to international lawyers don't work, our appeals to let rabidly pro-abortion people off won't either. They hold their views to justify their own desires, addictions, and lifestyle choices. The free marketplace of ideas doesn't work on insecure hedonists. Now, I understand that many people will be unhappy about that. You may ask why we'd stoop to their level. You may say that the current curtailing of speech is against us, but their end goal is not to suppress freedom, it's to suppress the ability to say that which is true. Our end goal is truth, and we must start operating again like we want victory. Nobody has a monopoly on truth, but when it comes to the destruction of babies, I can say that we're as damn close as is possible to a monopoly on that truth. The coming generation is done apologising, so we need to stop tiptoeing if we want the current pro-life movement to have any longevity. Therefore, I'm going to finish off with a quote that Randall Terry used to sum up his whole movement. If you believe abortion is murder, act like it. Come on, people, let's stick to the brief. Babies are being murdered, and it must stop.